Okay. So let's get started. Welcome, everybody. I know we have attendees watching on Zoom and we have attendees watching on YouTube. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first iteration of this webinar on why, what, and how to apply to grad school. My name is Henny Admoni. I'm an assistant professor in the Robotics Institute at Carnegie Mellon, and I'm joined by three fabulous students. So I'll have them introduce themselves first. Mono, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mononito Goswami. I'm a third-year PhD student in the Robotics Institute working in the Auton lab, and my work is on machine learning for healthcare.
Awesome. Rebecca?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Martin. I'm a second-year PhD student here at the Robotics Institute. I work with Dr. Sebastian Scheer on multi-agent systems for drones.
Awesome. And Tushar?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tushar. I'm a second-year master's student, the MSR program, and I work with Maxim Likachev on search-based motion planning.
Awesome. And just so that you all know, I believe the Q&A is open. So if you have questions, you can feel free to type them into the chat. We also in the chat have a link to where to get more information and ask questions. So let's get started. The goal of this webinar is to give you all a broad overview of what it's like to be in grad school and to apply to grad school. I will talk for 5 minutes at the beginning about the different types of programs. Then we'll have the students present for about 15 minutes on how you should actually go about crafting a strong application and what grad school is like. And then we'll have lots of time at the end to answer your questions. So please do ask questions in the chat. It's important to note what we're talking about today is really our own opinion and not everything that we say is necessarily going to be relevant or true for every single person. So these are all of our experiences and our opinions. So if you're here, you're probably thinking about going to grad school, but let's talk about the different options that you might have. The first thing you have to decide when you think about grad school is whether you want to pursue a PhD or a master's degree. Let's start with the master's degree. I'll describe those first. Those are shorter programs, typically 2 years long. They're typically self-funded, although it's sometimes possible to get a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship, which means that you get paid for either being a teaching assistant in a class or a research assistant in a lab. Typically, at the same institution, there will be more master's positions available than there will be PhD positions. And so it's slightly easier in any particular institution to get into the master's program in general. There are two kinds of master's programs, though, and you should think about what you want based on what your goals are for after the program. If you want to go to industry and what you're looking for is additional training in school, then you probably want to think about a professional master's. This is a program that focuses more on coursework and on giving you some specialized information, but not so much on research. If what you want to do is go to conduct research, maybe as a PhD student later, or do research in industry, you might want to think about a research-based master's, where you'll typically have to do a thesis and get a. By the way, I should say these slides are going to be available on the website that we linked in the chat after this presentation. So do not worry if you're not getting all the information, you'll be able to see a PDF of these slides. The second option, so rather than master's, is a PhD. And you should do a PhD if you really love research and if research is what you want to do with your life in the future. You'll have chances during your PhD to mentor more junior students and to teach classes or to be a TA for classes. And really, a PhD sets you up well for an academic career, so to be a professor or a research scientist in a university, but also sets you up for some industry research jobs that require PhDs. These programs are typically in the US, at least 5 or 6 years long. And typically, especially it's true at Carnegie Mellon, these programs are funded, which means that your tuition is covered and you get a small stipend as part of participating. So you get paid to do the PhD. Here's a quick example of what it looks like to go through a PhD, because 5 or 6 years is a long time. You'll notice that the first 2 years involve coursework and research together. So you're always doing research during this program, but the first 2 years, you'll also be taking courses. After the first 2 years, you pretty much don't take any more courses, and everything you're doing is focused on research and doing your dissertation. There will often somewhere around the 3rd year be some kind of qualifying exam at Carnegie Mellon that's split up into the research, speaking, and writing qualifier. We also require our students to TA 2 classes. And so that's often completed by the end of the 3rd year. In the 4th year, you're really focusing on your research. And at some point you'll do a proposal, which is where you propose what you want your dissertation to be about. And you support that proposal with some of the research you've already done. And then by year 5 or 6, you're really focusing on finishing up your dissertation research, writing up your dissertation, and doing a defense. Here's a handy flowchart that kind of summarizes the general things that I just said about the difference between master's and PhD. So you can go through this and answer the questions for yourself. The main thing to recognize from this chart is if what you want to do is research and you're excited about doing it for 5 or 6 years and you have some idea about what kind of research you want to do, the PhD might be right for you. If you're excited about research, but you aren't sure what you want to do, or you might not have had as much research experience as you want, think about a research master's. If what you want to do is go to grad school so that you can get more skills in a sort of course environment, in a more structured environment to improve your job applications and things like that, consider a professional master's. Or it's always an option to go get a job and then come back later. Lots of people will work for a few years, save up some money, and then come back into all kinds of grad programs. So that's definitely an option. All right. So that is a broad overview of how to apply. I'm going to pass it over to the students of why to apply, why to go to grad school. I'm going to pass it to the students to talk about how to apply.
Hey everyone, so I'm going to start talking about how to apply, and I'll pass it on to Mona at some point. So the main 4 components of applying to grad school are your CV, your statement of purpose, your letter of recommendation, and your test scores and transcripts. And we'll be going into detail into all of these components moving on. Next slide, please. So with your CV, here are some main things that you'd want to include and a few things you don't want to include. And the main objective is to concisely convey things that are relevant to your application. So definitely include research experience, publications, posters, and presentations. I know that some people don't have publications when they apply to especially master's programs, but that's totally fine as long as you include other forms of research like posters or other presentations. Any technical internships and long-term projects relevant to the program, any fellowships and awards you might have achieved in the past, and any service you've done in the form of volunteering, mentoring, TA-ships, and so on. Depending on the program, like really short-term projects might not be as relevant as the others, and you definitely don't need personal information like marital status and age and all those things. Next slide, please. So some more tips about a CV and how it might differ from a resume. So CVs, as most people have defined it, are typically longer than your resume and have more details, whereas resumes are typically 1 to 2 pages. You do have to ensure in both CVs and resumes that things are clear and concise and consistent, things like formatting and the way you structure each section and so on. A good way to sell yourself is also to exploit the fact that things are digital nowadays and to include links like presentations and papers and other things you've done in the past. A good thing is also like if you have a website, you can link it in your CV. There's usually no page number to CVs when you apply, but nobody wants to read a CV. It goes beyond 3 pages, especially when they're looking at huge applications and tons of applications. And it's always good to have points like we've done in these presentations to make sure people read everything and don't get lost in long prose. So for example, it's always good to use things like implemented or contributed as an action verb in the beginning, and then implemented so-and-so task in order to perform so-and-so research or get so-and-so result. Next slide, please. Oh, and we've added some links to the bottom for more assistance. Now, with your statement of purpose, which is typically what most people spend the most time on when applying, the main objective is to identify what you want to study and why. So the 3 main things your statement of purpose should include are what you're interested in working on. So what problems are interesting to you, why they're important to you in the world, then why are you specifically qualified to tackle these problems? What makes you a good fit to work on these things? And then for the specific program you're applying to, why is this program good for you? And that includes talking about who you want to work with at the institute, what specific things the program offers, the resources it offers that are useful to you, and how it'll help you achieve the goals that you mentioned in the beginning and in the end. So we'll go into a little more details about specific tips in the next slide. So all of these things that we mentioned until now were things that an SOP should have, but a really good SOP should have reasons and experiences that shaped what you aspire to do. So this can include research experiences, your previous programs, and this is a good place to also talk about why you might be switching fields, for example. What are your short and long-term goals? So in research programs, it's good to talk about short-term questions, research questions, and long-term goals about what you want to do with this research program once you graduate. And lastly, in terms of service and other outreach, how do you plan to give back to the community you get into through this program? And one main thing is to make sure that you do not repeat your CV in prose in your statement of purpose. It's a whole new document that you have an opportunity to talk about things that your CV does not, right? So your journey and your reasons for doing the things you want to do. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so the first link here is a resource from CMU's Academic Success Center that shows you, gives you some more details on how to write a successful essay, a successful statement. And the second resource is something we found recently where a lot of CS students have been uploading their previous statements to one central online portal. So hopefully these will be more helpful with the specific templates and formats of successful statements in the past. I'm gonna hand it over to Mono now to continue with the rest of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Tushar. So what we have now are 2 things which are already done. So we have your statement of purpose and as well as your CV. So now we'll briefly discuss one of the 3, the third most important things. And when I say that these 3 things, I think a question which is very often asked is what's more important? Is the letter of recommendation, or is it the SOP or the CV? And we delve deeper into that later, but the short answer is all of them are equally important. So coming back to the letter of recommendation, these are letters which give a holistic and outside perspective of your performance in research, academics, and work, how you are as a person, with lots of examples. Strong letters typically come from your research advisors when you're doing your undergrad or your master's, people who have advised you, your internship mentors. These can be both industrial internships and research internships, but people who are able to speak about you as a person. And then professors whom you have been a teaching assistant for. Less strong letters might come from professors who only know you from a class, even if you got an A. However, this might change if this is a research-based class with a very small number of students, and if you interacted with the professor very closely, then it might be a strong letter as well. And employers whom you did not work very closely. So I think the major takeaway from this is that you should have your letters from people who can talk about you and vouch for your abilities. For our applications at Carnegie Mellon, we generally need 3 or more letters of recommendations, but as long as you submit 3 letters of recommendations, you're good. And it's preferable if you have at least 2 letters from advisors in an academic setting. Now moving on to how can you help. So for some help on writing your letters, what's very important is that you kind of have these letters from people who know you very well. Again, people who can vouch for you and your abilities. Don't chase a big name, but it's important that you choose someone who knows you well. And it's also important to reach out beforehand. So, preferably 2 months before the deadline, but maybe that's not possible at this point in time. But also follow up 2 to 3 weeks before the deadline. And when you reach out, you should include supporting materials as well as talking points, things like a description of the internship or the graduate program, or basically the setting that you met your letter writer in, copies of your statement of purpose, your CV and transcript, so that they see where you are, what you have been doing ever since or before your internship or the research experience. And your SOP kind of will give them an idea of where you want to go and what are your academic interests and research interests. And then notes about your experience with this letter writer. What are the qualities that you demonstrated throughout the internship, and anything that you know that they should highlight. So letters are excellent places for you and your recommenders to answer and fill in some gaps. For instance, there might be a semester that you had an extremely low GPA, but this is where your letter writers can come in and vouch for the fact that, you know what, this particular student is excellent, but they had a personal hardship. And you know what, they overcame it. The GPA doesn't show the complete picture, and they've been excellent. So this is where the letters also come in, and that's also where the talking points come into play. Now on the next slide, we'll briefly discuss about fellowships. So there are a lot of fellowships which are available for US citizens as well as non-US citizens. And of course, there are some fellowships which do not have any citizenship requirements. If you join us at Carnegie Mellon, we also have some fellowships which are internal. Now, this list is in no way exhaustive. So one big takeaway from this slide would be that there are lots of fellowships and that you should be on a lookout for them. Having said that, fellowships are great for networking opportunities, for having financial independence in the research that you want to pursue. But as we've already mentioned, and perhaps we'll also reiterate a couple of times, PhD programs and sometimes research-based programs are PhD programs are always funded at Carnegie Mellon, and master's programs are also funded a lot of the times. So fellowships are not necessary in the sense for your financial independence, but having a fellowship allows you to do the research that you want to do. So it's always nice to be on a lookout for them. Now, how do you find a program? So PhD admissions and research-based master's admissions to some extent often come down to fit. Are the professors whom you're interested in taking any students? What are your research interests, and does it align with the research interests of the lab or a particular professor? So one very good thing before you start applying is to identify professors and programs whose work you find interesting and exciting, and which align with your interests of what you want to do in future. And then in your statement of purpose, you should go forward and mention some specific professors that you would like to work with and why your interests align with theirs. And this is how you will demonstrate fit in the statement of purpose. And a very frequently asked question is whether you should email professor. And the short answer is that it depends. So we have this link here. So once this presentation is online, you should go forward and read this wonderful little article by Professor Blisk. Yeah, short answer, it depends. There's a lot of professors who do not want to be emailed and who will say that, you know what, why don't you apply to the grad program? And if you get in, then we can have a chat. But of course, in some settings, there are professors who like to know that you are applying. So yeah, it's a good idea to always look and watch out what professors are writing in their website. Most of the times, professors who do not want to be reached out before hand will let you know on the website. So it's always a good idea to read their websites before you email them. Now, yeah, so now you know how to apply. We have the three key elements: the statement of purpose, the CV, and the letter of recommendation. We also have a brief idea of how to find a program and fellowships. But for CMU, we have the Graduate Application Support Program, which is led by students in the School of Computer Science, which offers feedback to potential applicants, and particularly those from underrepresented areas or those who are facing financial hardship. So the website is linked here. Feel free to go and check it out. This will help you with your CV and SOP. The deadline is November 11th, so you need to act fast.
But as an added note, it's okay to just have a draft of your CV and SOP to apply.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and another thing, SOPs not about the GAS program, but SOPs in general, they take time. So, start early. You'll have to go through multiple iterations. So yeah, but for the GAS program, like Professor Hadmuni mentioned, only drafts are a good starting point. Now, moving on to application fee waivers. At the School of Computer Science, we offer waivers for graduate application fees for a variety of reasons, for instance, financial hardship and to participants of certain programs. We have an incomplete list on this slide, but we'd like you to go forward and check out the link on this website to know more about application fee waivers. Now I'll hand it over to Rebecca to tell us how grad school is like.
Thanks, Mano. So now you know how to apply. And so we prepared a couple day in our lives slides. I guess you're first, Mano.
Oh, I'm back. So my day starts around 8:30 a.m. Hopefully, the alarms are generally set for 7:30 a.m., but there's a 1 hour buffer where I wake up. So around 9:30 to 10, between 9:30 to 10 a.m., it's solving a very complicated optimization problem, which is to reach school in the least amount of time possible. And the factors that this depends on is the time that the buses come in and the distance between home and school, that's the DHs there, as well as energy. I mean, some days you're just trained and you don't want to walk at all, plus some random noise here and there. So yeah, getting to school as soon as possible after you wake up. Then from 10 to 10:30 a.m. is watering my plants. So you the beautiful flower just blossomed a few days ago. So very excited about that. Filling all water bottles because yes, you need to stay hydrated. Getting coffee, which is an interesting experience. A lot of times, get to meet a lot of new people and bond over a cup of coffee early in the morning. 10 to 10:30 a.m. is very early for grad students, just for context. And then briefly discussing developments from 6 p.m. The day before with lab mates as I go around my office and lab. Then from 10:30 to 11 a.m. Is checking emails, planning what needs to be done in the day, prioritize stuff. And then we work. So we read papers, we'll maybe design some experiments, attend meetings, do some mentoring, attend maybe seminars, talks. And while all of this is happening, there's of course a lot of tea that goes along. Then from 12:15 to 1:15 is leisurely lunch with lab mates to again discuss developments that happen from 10 a.m. onwards, because of course there's a lot of things that can happen in a day. And free food is a bonus. So I think one thing that you'll come across in all of our lives is that, yeah, free food is kind of the driving factor, and it can take us around campus as long as the food is free. Anyways, from 1 to 6 p.m., the next 5 hours are classes. If you are in the first 2 or maybe 3 years, but also TA duties, especially if you're in the 3rd or 4th year, wherein you are helping, assisting as a assisting to run a class as a teaching assistant. So that's a lot of grading, answering questions on Piazza, and things of that sort. Again, meetings, executing daily plans, so actually doing work, and as well as and all of this is with ample socialization, procrastination, and again, tea. And then 6 to 7 p.m. is some working out, or again, some work depending on mood as well as deadlines. And then from 7:30 to 9 p.m., cooking dinner, having it, watching TV, and again, socializing. So on the top, you see a recent seminar that our lab conducted, on the right, the second figure on the right from the top is my desk, where I seem to have a very busy Google Calendar. So that's a lot of seminars here and there. And then finally, since it's all about work, this is the kind of healthcare data that I'd often be looking at in a day. So yeah, just a sneak peek into my day.
So a day in my life, I usually like to wake up a little earlier to get my day started before all the emails and notifications start coming in. So I usually wake up around 7 or 8. I'll work out in the morning because that's when my calendar is completely clear. Eat breakfast and then answer any emails that might have come in during the night. I usually aim to get to campus between 9 and 10. This semester I have class at 10, so that works out pretty well. After class, it's eating lunch, playing pool with friends. We have a very nice daily routine. And my lab is actually at a separate location off campus. So after lunch, I go take the bus to my lab. And then I work on research. Like Mano said, it's reading papers, writing code, meeting for projects and discussions. Then after that, around 4 p.m., depending on the day, if I have homework, I'll work on that. It's always nice to work on homework when you're in the lab because you might have other people taking that class. Then afterwards, at 6 p.m., if I don't have anything, I'll just go home, eat dinner. If I do, usually I would attend like maybe a club meeting or a seminar or some event that's going on. And then I also do some volunteering around the department. So working on logistics, again, sending more emails, just making sure everything's in place for any events we're having. And then after that, planning for the next day, just unwinding, maybe watching a little bit of TV. And that's usually how my day looks. So on the right, I have the top picture is my desk in our new lab space. On the left, I have the pool table, which is the center of socializing in my daily life. And then on the right, I have a picture of our drones. So because I work with drones, we do need to do some field testing every now and then. So if I were doing field testing, that would usually take up the entire morning. We'd be out in an offsite location where it's away from people and we can safely test our autonomy stack. So here we have a picture of some of the students here from our PhD cohort. And this shows just what a diversity of research areas we cover here at the Robotics Institute. So we have a group of friends and they have their research area next to them. And you can see they're all different and they all work on a different part of the robot. So we have things like planning, safety, manipulation, machine learning. So it just goes to show the breadth we cover. And so if you are interested in something that is applicable to robots, even if you don't think it's specifically robotics, you can still find a place here at RI. Next slide. And another thing we do as PhD students and also master's students is we attend conferences. So these are usually a week long, a couple times a year. So these are both from this year. IROS just happened last month and ICRA was in May. So these are pretty major conferences. So usually a lot of people go and we have fun. We have attending talks, networking, and we usually will have a lunch or dinner for CME people to all meet up, everyone who traveled out there. So this is where these photos are taken. So right now we've been talking more generally just about grad school, but with a little bit of CME specific stuff built in. But here we want to point out, why should you attend CMU? So for RI specifically, our robotics program is one of the top. We have the largest number of faculty of any robotics program in the world. So we do focus on both breadth and depth. So you can feel like you have a holistic education here and you're not just focused in your one research area. We do encourage collaborations with industry, government, and other academic departments, both in CMU and outside of CMU. So you will get a vast network by coming here. And also it's a good cost of living. So we can see here some typical rents for a 1-bedroom, or if you have a 2 to 4 bedroom with roommates, it will be with roommates will be $500 to $800, and if you live by yourself, $800 to $1,300. And for PhD students, CMU also does provide free health insurance, and we also cover mental health resources. And also, Pittsburgh is a fun place to live. So there are many things to do around campus. There are many things to do around the city. So you can easily get out and explore, and it doesn't cost that much. Next slide, please. So PhD stipends are generally very similar across the board, whether you go to a school on the West Coast like Stanford, whether you're here at CMU or even MIT. So here we have, just for comparisons, how the cost of living is going to affect your stipend. So for example, here at CMU, you'll get around $38,000, and you can live very comfortably on that. Whereas if you were to go somewhere like, say, San Francisco, you'd need to make $69,500 just to maintain that same standard of living. And it can get even higher. So for New York, $88,000, which is actually getting to be a lot of money. So you can see that's more than double. And here on the bottom, we have, if you were going to live in Boston, you need Boston and Seattle, you need $57,000 to maintain that standard of living. So now we have some frequently asked questions. We're all gonna chime in here, but I'll start with the first one. How much research experience do you need in robotics to apply? And how many publications? So there is no fixed number. You can get in with a ton of publications or with no publications at all. You should have some research experience, but it doesn't have to be in robotics. For example, speaking from my experience, I had done research in theoretical computer science before coming here. So it only had a small bit of relation to robotics, and I had no traditional robotics research experience. But I showed and demonstrated in my application that through those experiences, I had the qualities necessary to succeed in a graduate program. And I guess they liked it because I'm here now.
Tushar, you want to take the next question?
Yeah. So I'm gonna take the next one. How important are standardized testing, GRE, IELTS, TOEFL scores? So at least with the, let's split this up. So the GRE is typically a way to get like a baseline idea of the technical and verbal requirements, I think, of a student. And more recently, a lot of programs specifically have not been asking for GRE scores, but definitely make sure that you confirm that for your specific program, because even if one school does not ask for GRE scores for some program, it might for another. And with IELTS and TOEFL, I think for international students at least, it's still quite important. So these are definitely wherever required. They are typically important to, I think, compare students beyond other main parts of the application. But from what I've been told, a low-ish GRE score or TOEFL score, as long as it's more than the minimum bar they expect, is not going to really be the main reason you get accepted or rejected. I think that's a concise way to put it. So while they are important, they're not the most important. And I've seen a broad range of GRE and IELTS, TOEFL, at least GRE and TOEFL scores among people who successfully get into at least the master's program and some PhD programs. But I'm happy to have others chime in with other opinions on this as well. Yeah.
That was a good answer. I think standardized testing is a chance for you to shine. And if you have a very low score, you might rethink taking the test again after getting some more experience. Mono, you want to answer this question?
Yes. So when you're applying for grad schools, you'll see this, the FERPA Buckley Amendment waiver a lot of times. And at least when I was applying, I did not know what that was, but it won't be the same for you guys, because I'll give you a brief overview of what the Buckley Amendment is and how you should kind of navigate this waiver situation and whether you should waive your rights or not. So FERPA regulates the privacy of student education records, which could include your application to the college you enroll. It also gives you the right to review confidential letters of recommendation provided as a part of your application. Now, waiving your right lets colleges know that you do not intend to read your recommendation, which helps assure the college that the letters are candid and truthful. Some recommenders may also decline to write a letter for you if you do not waive your rights. And yeah, so it's a good rule of thumb to waive the Buckley Amendment rights. But again, it's just an opinion, and it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. I'll also take the next question on something that I'm very, very frequently asked, which is that what is more important? Is it the SOP? Is it the letters of recommendations, the grades or scores, or research experience? And now the very unsatisfying answer to that question is all of them are very important. I mean, when we evaluate your application. We look at a very holistic perspective, which includes your SOP. What do you want to do? Why? What are your research aspirations, and why? How are you qualified to kind of do research? And why are you passionate about doing this specific kind of research? The letters of recommendations give us some idea of how are you as a person, as a colleague, as a student. The grades tell us, very noisy measure of diligence and whether you're willing to do the work when you're supposed to do it. And like Tushar mentioned very eloquently, it's these are just ways for you to these are again noisy measures, not the most important, but when you put them or put all the pieces together, it just gives us more idea of how you are as a student, and if you have an ability to succeed in grad school. And research experience again is very important, because I mean, you're coming into a master's or a PhD program, which can take 2 to 5 years, where all that you will be doing is research most of the time. So if you have research experience, then it tells us that what you are going to be doing for the next 2 to 5 years, and it sets you up really well. Having said that, research experience is not mandatory, but yeah, having some research experience is a plus.
Let me just add to that. That was an excellent answer. And Mono basically covered all the points that I wanted to make. I just want to say that the goal of your application is both to demonstrate why you'd be a good student, but also to demonstrate fit. And so one of the things that's a little bit harder for you as an applicant to determine when you're applying is whether you fit with faculty who have open research positions that year. And so part of your SOP and your research experience and your letters also paint a picture of you as a researcher and what topic you want to cover and where your strengths are. And that will help the committee evaluate not just would you make a good student, but also would you make a good student for the positions that are open this year in the faculty. And that's not something that you can kind of game or tell ahead of time. So that's just something that that those documents are considered for.
Yeah, so I'm going to take the next one. Other opportunities besides MS and PhD degrees. Nice question. So definitely there are ways to get a foot into CMU, and especially RI in other ways. The first thing is that there's a summer program called the RISS, the Robotics Institute Summer Scholars Program. Mono and I were both parts of it at some point. So if you're an undergrad right now and you're not in your final year of undergrad, it's something you can apply to. And it's a great program. It has a very diverse cohort every year, and you work with a PhD student typically and a professor, and you work on a short summer project, which is a good way to get some research experience and an idea about how things are at RI. Similarly, there are other summer programs for many others for each school. We don't have a list right now, but I'm sure if you look up, and maybe you can try to have a list at some point on the website. Maybe if we have a place to share information, we can figure that out after the webinar. But schools have the summer programs, and they're usually research focused. So that's one good way to get into research or other technical programs, figure out how things are. Another thing I wanted to bring up is that before my master's, I was working as research staff in the Robotics Institute. This is a little less formal than the summer program because there's no specific application date or something like that. But depending on the lab, and this is not a blanket statement, obviously, depending on the lab, depending on how projects are going, what funds are available, and so on, certain labs that have system level requirements might be looking for programmers or research staff and engineers and so on. So if, again, do look at the general guide on emailing professors. But if it's a good fit and you know what you want to work on, you have think you have the skills, then it can be useful to email professors and see if there are open opportunities. But obviously, like cold emailing, mass emails. Sorry, not cold emailing. That is a cold. But mass emails are usually like completely that are not tailored specifically to a lab or projects are usually not going to be that helpful. So those are two opportunities I know of besides degree programs that come to mind right now. I'm happy to let others chime in as well.
I think that was a great answer. Yeah, basically other opportunities to do research are good ways of figuring out if you want to go to graduate school or strengthening your profile. I'll take the last question here, which is how do we know which faculty are currently hiring new PhD students? The truth is that it can be tricky. Sometimes faculty will put this directly on their webpage because they know that they need students in a particular role. More often than not, when applications are going in December, the faculty aren't sure what kind of role they'll need to hire for in September. And so there's a little bit of guesswork on both sides. So the thing to do is check faculty members' websites, see if they do say anything about whether they're hiring or how to contact them if you're interested in applying. Read their current papers, like published in the last year or two, to get a sense of what they're working on. And apply if you and list those faculty members in your application. The thing that you want to do is make sure that you're talking about their current work, so not work that they've done 10 years ago or work that they only published one paper in. And you want to make sure those faculty are, for example, still at that institution. Sometimes the faculty web pages lag behind the university web pages, but the university list of faculty will generally be accurate. So the short answer is it's a little hard to tell. The long answer is you can tell by looking at websites. You can also try to contact students of that faculty member, but they probably won't have much of an answer for you. I think we have some questions from YouTube and the chat. One question was, is it fine if I give unofficial scores in case it takes a long time for ETS to send the scores before the deadline? Yeah, absolutely. You can upload the unofficial score document that you get as part of your application. Totally fine. And the kind of add-on to that is, how is the application reviewed by the admissions committee? Like we said before, it's holistic. So we're looking for things that identify that the student is likely to be successful at research in our institution with the resources that we have. And so it's a little hard to say exactly how this is identified, but every part of the application kind of builds, it contributes to that story about the student.
There was one more question in the YouTube. I guess everyone can chime in. Will a research-focused applicant have an advantage over a career-focused one? And I think they mean an industry-focused one rather than career. But I think short answer is depends on the program you're applying to. For PhD and the MSR program, the master's program that focuses on research, definitely I think showing an interest in research is going to be more useful. That doesn't mean showing interest in industry is not going to be useful, because a lot of research is inspired from an applied industry. So, but definitely having research interest is probably like required for research programs. If it's not a research program, then likewise, like having research interest is not going to hurt you, but definitely a focus on industry and why you're interested specifically in industry is good. Yeah. So yeah, there's no short answer. It just depends.
So we have another question on the chat, and I'd like all of you to also chime in. So how does work in academia differ from being a research industry in the research scientist in the industry? And the question further asks that both are doing research, but I guess there are some differences. So I can take a quick shot at that answer. And I would love for you guys to also chime in to that one. So I think the difference between research in industry and academia, the similarity is that in whether you are in the industry or in academia, you can still kind of drive a lot of impact. So as long as you're doing impactful research, you have the opportunity to do that in industry as well as in academia. Sometimes empirically, what happens to be the case is that research in the industry can be a lot more computationally intensive because they have the kind of resources that so that you can run a lot of large scale experiments, and hence things like GPT, BERT, all of these large language models that you would have been hearing about a lot came out of the industry. But research in the academia on the other side is much more fundamental because and hence you'd always hear people saying that research in academia or innovation is at least half a decade or a decade before in the industry itself, because in the industry, because in academia you have, I think, a much more academic freedom to do research into much more fundamental things, which do not make perhaps financial sense as of now, and hence doesn't make sense for an industry research lab to pick up, but you can do it in the industry. But I'd love for you guys to come in.
Yeah, that was a great answer. I think that the one big difference is applying for funding. In academia, you have to apply for grants from funding agencies, whereas in industry research, typically your funding is coming internally from the company that you work for. The benefit of having funding internal is that you don't have to continue to chase it and worry about it. The downside is that you have to shape your research to the priorities of the company. Academic research can be a lot broader. There are also elements of tenure in academia, like kind of job security in academia after some number of years that you don't get in a research industry position. We've been answering questions from the chat and from YouTube, but please feel free to continue typing in your questions in the chat, and we will answer them. I'm gonna actually answer this question in the chat live. The question is, how are TA and RA-ship opportunities for students taking up professional master's programs? If you can share a rough number of how much percentage of people get these, that would be get a good idea. These would give us a good idea. I think I don't have a number for you, unfortunately. I will say that the probability of getting a TA-ship or RA-ship in a professional master's program like CMU's MRSD is lower than in a research master's program like CMU's MSR. And part of this is because the students in the research master's program are supposed to do research. Research is part of their course plan. It's accounted for when considering the number of classes they have to take, whereas students in the professional masters are mostly doing coursework. All of their time is taken up with coursework, and the research happens kind of on top of that. So at Carnegie Mellon, it's much less likely if you're doing a professional master's to have that opportunity to get a research assistantship. Not that it doesn't happen, it certainly does, but it's less common.
I think we have some more questions on the Google form. For instance, in addition to the statement of purpose, how do other essays such as the personal statement, diversity statement, the personal narrative, etc., how are they evaluated by the admissions committee? So that's a great question. For the CMU RI PhD program, you do not need a personal or a diversity statement or a personal narrative. But for other programs, you might need. So I think when you have more than one essays that you have to write, then it's a good idea to focus more on your research interests, on a research statement, and more of your personal journey and what you're interested in and why you're interested in a particular aspect in your personal statement or your personal narrative, and writing how you are committed to bringing in diversity, equity, and inclusion in your diversity statement. But I'd also let others chime in to answer that question.
I'll chime in as the faculty member here. Like I said before, it's a holistic process. The essays that give more of a personal focus and less of a research focus are meant to describe the student outside of their coursework. And the point there is that we are looking, especially for the PhD, where you're here for a long time, we're looking for students that are going to benefit our community. And so things like the diversity statement or the personal statement give us a sense of who you are, what your challenges were, what you've contributed to other communities that you've been part of in the past, and help us understand how you might contribute to our community going forward.
We also have some questions on the letter of recommendation. So is it helpful to have more than 3 letters of recommendation? And is it necessary for these letters to come from STEM degree holders? I'd let others answer that question.
I feel like I'm more qualified to talk about the admissions process than the student life. So I'll answer the admissions process questions and the students can answer the student life and other questions like that. So your letters of recommendation should all work for you, which is to say they should all be kind of contributing to this core message of you as a future student. And ideally for PhD and for research masters, a future researcher. So is it necessary that they come from a STEM degree holder? No, not necessarily. People who are in academia will have a better sense of what academic letters of recommendation look like, because they are a little bit different than, for example, job references. And so it's helpful to have academics write those because they sort of understand the lingo. But it's not critical, especially if this is a letter that is talking about your work outside of research or outside of academia. For example, if you held a job or an internship and you have your internship advisor write you a letter. All of your letters, though, should be talking about you as a potential researcher or as a potential student. So as long as they're doing that, it's not critical that they necessarily come from someone in the field. That said, it really helps if your letter is coming from somebody who can, through their own experience, like explain your background through their lens, right? So somebody in STEM or in academia can compare you to prior students, can say things like, this is the best student I've seen in 10 years. They have that depth of knowledge that can make their letter stronger. And so in general, that's why you want to look for letter writers who are in the field.
Thanks, Professor. I think there's like we're out of time, but we have some very common questions that I'd like to give like very short answers to, and of course, feel free to chime in again. Some questions are on the length of the CV. So some people are asking if a 2-page CV or a 1.5-page CV is fine. Again, one size does not fit all, depends on how the template is, but like Tushar mentioned earlier, it's preferable to keep it short because we have a lot of admissions, and it's in your best interest that that we are able to kind of see all of everything in as much as quickly as possible. So it's a good idea to have a CV which is 2 to 3 pages long, wherein you're highlighting all of the things that you think the admissions committee should know. And then another question is it important to have a research paper published before you apply to a master's program or a PhD program? And the answer to that is that it's not mandatory or very important for you to have a research paper. So before getting into a master's or a PhD program, which are research based, what the admissions committee generally looks for is demonstration of one, your interest in doing research, and two, your ability to do research. And research paper is just one artifact, but there are other artifacts such as code or posters, videos that you can also come up with, which demonstrate your ability as well as your interest in doing research, which also happen to be very strong indicators and of your research interest and ability.
All right. So we are out of time. Thank you all for joining us. We are going to host 2 more of these webinars. The information is on our website, so feel free to join those as well if you would like. I'm going to try to put that link in the chat. Nope, that's not the link. Yeah, thank you to the students who participated in this panel. I hope that it was helpful. Take care, everyone. Bye.